Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Sunday School here at the Lighthouse Church of the Nazarene in Moravia, Iowa, where we're going through the book of Nehemiah right now. This week, we're in Nehemiah chapter 6. This week, in chapter 6, the wall is actually going to get completed, and it's only going to take them 52 days. So the wall is going to get completed here. Now, one thing I think we need to ask ourselves is, why is the book of Nehemiah even in the Bible? Well, for one thing, it's a historical account of the Jewish nation. It's a good historical account. That's one reason it's in there. But I think for another reason, I think up to this point, this book has shown us what the attitude of a true servant of God looks like. If you remember clear back in 1 Samuel, when King Saul was king, when King Saul failed and God said, I'm seeking another person, a man after my own heart. I think Nehemiah is a man after God's own heart. After all, God's burdens were Nehemiah's burdens. Remember, Jerusalem is sitting in disrepair. Nehemiah says, I need to do something about that. Also, Nehemiah, he never let any distractions get to him. There were always enemies trying to come on, trying to get him to waver, but he just worked relentlessly. He never wavered, and he always stayed on track. So, like I said, I think Nehemiah is just a great godly example of what a true servant of God looks like. So this week we're in Nehemiah chapter 6. The wall is going to get completed this week. Let's get out our Bibles. Let's follow along. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 1. Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and that there were no breaks left in it, though at that time I had not hung the doors and the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, Come, let us meet together among the villages in the plain of Ono. The plain of Ono, this would have been about 10 miles away from Jerusalem. But they sought to do me harm. So what do they want to do? They want to schedule a meeting. Right there, Nehemiah should have known that something was up, because is there anything worse than a meeting? Meetings are just places where you get together where no work is actually getting accomplished, but people feel like they're doing something. Meetings are the worst. So that's why Nehemiah surely knew something was wrong, correct? But notice here that he says, they thought to do me harm. Nehemiah was a man of God, and it takes true spiritual discernment to know that these people wanted to do him harm. I think this is only spiritual discernment that God can give. Proverbs 2:6 says, for the Lord gives wisdom. Out of his mouth comes understanding and knowledge. Nehemiah, firmly rooted in the word of God, he would have known, like, hey, something's up here. These guys they're seeking to do me harm. They're not just wanting to meet out here. Verse 3. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? Nehemiah's like, hey, I'm not at your beck and call right here. I'm actually busy right now, and you guys are trying to distract me. Two things I want to talk about right here. First off, beware of distractions. Nehemiah has a job to do, so he has to focus on the job at hand. He can't be getting distracted by everybody that's vying for his attention, right? Jesus in the parable of the sower in the 13th chapter of Matthew, there was a sower who went out who sowed seeds, and there were actually 4 different soil types that the sower sowed on. Some fell by the wayside, some fell on rocks, some fell among thorns, and some fell on good soil. If you remember, the ones that sowed among the thorns were those who hear the word, but then the cares of this life and the deceitfulness of riches chokes out the word, and they become unfruitful. So the seeds sown among the thorns are the ones who get distracted by trying to, get everything that life has to offer them. Jesus warned us about distractions and how easy it is nowadays to have distractions and fill up our time with useless stuff when we could be living for the Lord. One other thing I want to talk about right here. Don't let yourself become isolated. If Nehemiah had went out to them in the plains of Ono, he would have been isolated from the rest of his people, right? Hebrews 10:25 says, let us not forsake the assembling of ourselves, as is the manner of some. So many people nowadays like, well, I don't need church. I don't need to be a part of a church. I can get all my preaching on TV right now, and that's all I need. But let's think about this. When lions go hunting, what do? They separate the weakest ones out from the rest of the pack, do they not? And 1 Peter 5:8 tells us that our adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So Nehemiah's smart here. He doesn't get distracted. He also doesn't let himself get isolated from the rest of his group right here. So that's what's going on right now. Sanballat, 4 different times, his enemies say, hey, come meet us in the plain of Ono. And Nehemiah's like, nope, I have work to do. Leave me alone, guys. Verse 5. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me as before, the fifth time with an open letter in his hand. Now, this is actually significant right here, that it's an open letter. Letters back then that would have been sent to officials, they were sealed letters. They would have been wrapped with twine, they would have been wrapped with string, and then wax would have been poured on them, and then the signet ring, the seal of the official, would have been put on it. So it was a sealed letter so that whoever received it knows that, hey, nobody else has looked at this. Nobody else has read it. It was a sealed letter. We would have seen this. Remember when David sent the letter to Joab about Uriah? Uriah carried his own death sentence to Joab the general. He obviously didn't open it up and read it. It would have been a sealed letter. Jezebel, we saw her with Naboth's vineyard with a sealed letter. But this wasn't a sealed letter. This was an open letter. Sanballat would have wanted everybody to know the contents of this letter. Whoever was carrying it would have been like, oh my, look at this, and could have told everybody along the way. He's basically running a smear campaign against Nehemiah right here by sending the open letter. Now, let's see what this letter says. Verse 6, in it was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem says that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, notice that, rumors, you are rebuilding the wall that you may be their king. And you also have appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying, there is a king in Judah. Now these matters will be reported to the king. So come, therefore, let us consult together. So in this open letter that Sanballat sends, so everybody can read it, he's trying to run down Nehemiah and get scared. These are pretty serious allegations right here that Nehemiah himself is trying to become king. Because the Persian king, if he thought there was any chance of an uprising or rebellion, it would have been handled pretty quickly and pretty violently right there. Sanballat, notice here, he's not reporting any facts, is he? It's all rumors and reports right there in verse 6. It is reported among you, according to these rumors. There are zero facts right here. It's all rumors. In the book of Proverbs, there are 6 things the Lord hates. 7 are an abomination. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, feet that are swift to running to evil, a false witness, and one who sows discord among the brethren. Sanballat right here, he's trying to sow discord among them. He's trying to create problems right here. So let's see how Nehemiah handles this. Verse 8, then I sent to him saying, no such thing as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. There's a great lesson here from Nehemiah. Is Nehemiah worried about this? He goes, no, not one bit. There will be times in our lives that people put words in our mouths and accuse us of saying stuff that we never did. What can we do about it? Well, Ecclesiastes 7:21 says, do not take everything people say to heart. It's interesting. Charles Spurgeon wrote a whole chapter in his book just about that verse. Do not take everything people say to heart. We can't take everything personal, can we? People are going to say stuff. Just let them talk, right? The second thing that we can take out of this, these are just all outright lies. And in the book of 1 Peter, there's 2 verses in 1 Peter that kind of talk about this. It says that we should have our conduct honorable among Gentiles so that when people speak evil against us, that we would glorify God by our own actions. 1 Peter 3:16 says that we should have a good conscience, that when people defame us as evildoers, they will bring shame on themselves. So our character should take care of our reputation. We should live so admirably amongst the people that if somebody accused us of doing something, nobody would believe it. So that's what Nehemiah, he says, you know what? No such things as you say are being done. You're inventing them all in your own heart. Verse 9, for they were all trying to make us afraid, saying, their hands will be weakened in the work, and it will not be done. Now, therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. This is just another one of Nehemiah's flash prayers right here. We see this all throughout the book of Nehemiah. Just one quick verse. Nehemiah, it's going long, then just real quick. Now, therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. Just a flash prayer as he's going out through his day. Where did Nehemiah turn to in his times of adversity? He turned to God. Psalm 50:15 says, call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, God says. So let's keep going here. Verse 10, afterward, I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delilah, the son of Mehabel, who was a secret informer. And he said, let us meet together in the house of God. within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. Now, this man, as we're about to find out, is actually a double agent. He's actually working for Sanballat right here. But he says, hey, Nehemiah, they're going to try to kill you. Come, let us go hide in the temple right here. One thing we can take away from this, of all of Satan's horrible qualities, we kind of have to admire his persistence. It seems like he is never quitting right here. It's interesting. After Satan tempted Jesus in the wilderness, in Luke 4:13, it says that he then departed from him till a more opportune time. Satan's always looking for opportunities, isn't it? Is he not? It's interesting. As in the book of Genesis, sometimes Satan comes as a deceiving serpent. As First Peter says, sometimes he comes like a roaring lion. In 2 Corinthians 11, it says sometimes he himself shows him as an angel of light. We have no idea how he's going to come, but we do know that he's persistent, and we know that he always is walking about, seeking whom he may devour. Now, this man, he's a double agent. He's actually working for Sanballat. He says, hey, Nehemiah, they're going to try to kill you. Come, let us hide in the temple. Well, right away, Nehemiah should have known that something was up, because Nehemiah is not he's not allowed to go just walk right in the temple. That's for the priests only. So verse 11, and I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. Notice the bravery of Nehemiah right here. He says, am I going to flee because somebody's trying to kill me? Certainly not. Would such a man as I walk into the temple just to try to save his own life? Certainly not. In John chapter 10, Jesus talks about, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But the hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and he does not care about the sheep. So we have the difference between the good shepherd and the hireling. The good shepherd, he gives his life for the sheep. The hireling, he runs and flees because they're not his sheep. Nehemiah is a good shepherd right here. They say, Nehemiah, they're going to kill you. He says, I don't care. Bring them on. We really admire Nehemiah as we go through his book here. So verse 12, then I perceived that God had not sent him at all. As we said, remember, this guy was a double agent, but Nehemiah knew it. But that he pronounced this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Verse 13, for this reason he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way and sin, so that they might have cause for an evil report, that they might reproach me. Now, two thoughts right here. Notice that it says right there in verse 13 that I should be afraid and act that way and sin. Now, what is he talking about, the and sin? First of all, he could be talking about the sin of going into the temple. But he could also be talking about here, notice that he says, should I be afraid and act that way and sin? Is it a sin to be afraid? That's kind of a tricky question, is it not? Do you know how many times through the Bible it says, do not fear, do not be afraid? I've heard it's 365. I don't know if that's true or not, but all throughout the Bible it tells us, do not be afraid, do not fear. And you know what? If you go to Revelations chapter 21, verse 8, do you know who it says will have their place in the lake of fire? The cowardly. So maybe it is a sin to be afraid. That's what Nehemiah said right here. Should I be afraid and act that way and sin, so that I might have a cause for an evil report, that they might reproach me? So Nehemiah could have maybe tried to save his own life. He'd been falling into a trap, but he didn't do it. Verse 14, my God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat. This is another one of Nehemiah's flash prayers right here. According to these their works, and the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid. Verse 15, so the wall was finished in the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. So the wall was completed. It only took them 52 days to do this massive building project. You notice the interesting thing? In Nehemiah chapter 2, Nehemiah spent 4 months in prayer before he even went before the king to ask if he could go to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. So he spent twice as long in prayer as he did actually getting the walls rebuilt. And this was a massive building project. 2.5 miles of wall, maybe 10 feet wide, 40 foot tall in places. This was a massive building project, and Nehemiah got it completed in 52 days. Verse 16, and it happened when all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations around us saw these things, that they were very disheartened in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was done by our God. They could tell this work right here, it was nothing but the hand of God. That was the only way to explain it. Verse 17. Also in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came to them. For many in Judah were pledged to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Ara, the son of Jehoianan, had married the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah. Also, they reported his good deeds before me, and reported my words to him. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Notice tons of people have allied themselves with Tobiah, so that Nehemiah really doesn't even know who's his friend and who's his enemy out here. A lot of them were telling Nehemiah, oh, this Tobiah, he's a good guy. And a lot of them were telling Tobiah all the stuff that Nehemiah was doing. So we're done with chapter 6. What can we take away from this chapter right here? You and I, we have no idea how God can use us. God used Nehemiah to set something right that had been laying that way for maybe 130, 150 years. He completed this work in 52 days, but the walls have been laying in ruins for 100 years. You wonder how many people during this 100 years ignored the calling of God to go back and help work on Jerusalem. But Nehemiah, he was just like Isaiah. When God said, whom shall I send and who shall go for us? Nehemiah said, here I am, send me. And he got the job done. 52 days. Pretty impressive, eh? All right, we're done with Nehemiah chapter 6. Next week, we're going to skip over 7. We'll just do a few verses because chapter 7, it's the same as chapter 2, which was just a bunch of names. And so we'll skip over that and we'll be in Nehemiah chapter 8 next week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And I'll see you the same time, same place next week. Bye.